In my last video on Classic World of Warcraft, we explored one of the game's most overlooked storylines, a hidden gem tucked away in Tirisfal Glades involving an NPC that many of you all probably missed while leveling up. And while going through that questline, I briefly mentioned another character, somebody barely touched on in that video, but whose shadow looms large over northern Lordaeron. This NPC is one of my absolute favorite examples of subtle, brilliant storytelling in classic WoW, and you might not recognize his name right away, but I can almost guarantee that you have felt his presence in-game, interacted with him second-handedly, whether you realized it or not. So today, we are going to dive into his story, but to do that properly, we're going to need to start fresh by creating a brand new Forsaken character and heading straight for Brill, because that is where this journey truly begins. A quick shout out to this channel's sponsor, Zygor, World of Warcraft's Ultimate Guide add-on, linked down below in the description. Let's get started. Despite the destruction caused by the recent scourging of Lordaeron, the Forsaken are determined to rebuild some semblance of society amidst the ruins of their former kingdom. Magistrate Severin is the overseer of Brill, and upon talking with him, one of the first quests that he offers to players is called Grave Robbers.
The mass graves, southwest of Garen's haunt to the north, were made to accommodate the impressive number of deaths Tirisfal suffered when the plague first came. The bodies in these graves have so far been spared an undeath, but the Scourge now send Rothhide gnolls to gather the corpses and use them to bolster their armies. This cannot be allowed.
The objective of this quest is pretty straightforward. Slaughter 8 Rothhide grave robbers, 5 mongrels, and also collect 8 embalming ichors, which apparently is the substance the Scourge uses to give these undead gnolls their life. And as you venture off to do this quest, everything should proceed rather ordinarily. As we're killing this gnolls, we see the sheer amount of bodies that they have been digging up and collecting to do who knows what with. Just piles upon piles of them. It's horrifying. But there's something that may occur during this particular adventure that might catch a sharp-eyed player's attention. Occasionally, some of the Rothides may cast a spell and inflict you with a spirit-reducing debuff called Curse of Thule. The spell makes your character all dark and terrifying looking, really capturing that my spirit is decayed vibe. Always thought this was really cool looking. But who is this Thule exactly? Is he the leader of the Rothhide gnolls, or is this some sort of undead-y, magic-ish sounding word that doesn't really mean anything? Well, we're not really given an answer upon returning to the magistrate. He just says, "Thanks for the job well done," and the quest chain ends there. I should also note that there's another quest that has us interact with these gnolls in this northern area of Tirisfal called Wanted Maggot Eye, but this quest too doesn't really give us any answers as to the origins of this mysterious curse. So for many players, it doesn't mean anything. They move on and the adventure for the Forsaken player would continue. They would fight against the Scarlet Crusade, more undead from the Scourge, without any mention of the gnolls stealing bodies from Tirisfal Glades ever again. However, upon entering Silverpine Forest, a few strange oddities would emerge, again for sharp-eyed players as they quest through this new area of Azeroth. An adventurous player, for example, might accidentally venture off the road near the Sepulchre and find themselves suddenly beset upon by a host of undead. And these undead, specifically the skeletal warriors, upon attacking, may inflict players with yet another mysterious curse, Touch of Ravenclaw. All these NPCs as well would be called things like Servant of Ravenclaw. And at this point in our adventure, we have never encountered anybody by the name of Ravenclaw, no Scourge agent or anything with that name leading the undead. So we kind of end up in the same position we were at with the gnolls back in Tirisfal Glades. Are these undead a part of a faction called the Ravenclaw? Are they led by a lich named Ravenclaw? We're not really entirely sure. And what makes things even more confusing is that far down in the south of the zone, in a place called Baron's Peril, there are these undead within the cave that will inflict players with a curse called Blessing of Thule. Very similar to that Curse of Thule spell that we encountered all the way back in Tirisfal Glades with the Wrought-Hide Gnolls, but now we have undead casting this Thule magic. So clearly, whoever or whatever this Thule is, it's either a form of necromantic magic that we've yet to fully uncover, or maybe there's a villain hiding in the shadows waiting to be revealed named Thule. Servants of Ravenclaw, curses of Ravenclaw, blessings of Thule, curses of Thule. Like, who is Ravenclaw? Who's Thule? What is Ravenclaw? What is Thule? Well, in the Sepulchre, we begin to find our answers when we first interact with the High Executor Hadric, who tells us of a large wrought-hide base located in the north of the zone. There is an abandoned farm called the Dreadfields, and apparently the wrought-hide there are protected by a banshee named Nightlash, who we're tasked with slaying in order to wrestle control of the area into the Forsaken's hands. Now, this is the first interaction that a Forsaken player would have with the wrought-hide in some time, and I'm sure that many players, including myself, were surprised to see that this little tribe of gnolls was more widespread than what was initially thought. What seemed to be just a simple threat in Tirisfal, a bunch of undead gnolls digging up some dead bodies, actually appears to be a well-organized tribe of enemies to the Forsaken, who are clearly seen as quite valuable to the Scourge if they are protected by a powerful Banshee. Well, regardless, after killing these gnolls and their Banshee protector, we return to the Sepulchre victorious. The High Executor has more for us to do, however, as he has been quite disturbed by this growing presence of the Wrought-Hide in what remains of Lordaeron. We're then told to go and cleave our way through the undead in the eastern side of the zone to reach what's called the Decrepit Ferry, as there's something odd happening afoot at that dock, and the gnolls are somehow involved in it. Upon making our way to the location, we will discover a large collection of corpses ready for transport by boat, all protected by multitudes of undead. A pile of corpses that looks very similar to the bodies that we found back in Tirisfal Glades. And it's among all of these wrapped up dead bodies that we find a golden ring that the High Executor tells us must have belonged to somebody who was buried in one of the mass graves in Tirisfal Glades. And yet somehow, their body made its way all the way to Silverpine Forest. So it's at this stage of the story that we learn a surprising connection between the zones of Tirisfal and Silverpine. It's made evident to us that the Wrought-Hide gnolls, the one that we battled hours ago in our adventure, who were digging up those graves in Tirisfal and collecting the dead, clearly they have been shipping those corpses south down into Silverpine Forest, where they're being gathered at the Decrepit Ferry for transport to the haunted island of Fenris, located in the center of Lordamere Lake. The Executor immediately wants more answers, so he tasks you with going to the Fenris Isle, and he wants you to slaughter some of the Wrought-Hide gnolls that are present there. And while you're killing these gnolls, he wants you to collect their ichor for examination by the Forsaken apothecaries. It's his hope that perhaps the ichor may reveal who is behind this body transportation operation, or at least reveal a weakness in the Wrought-Hide tribe. So, taking a swim east, the player then spends some time in the shadow of the dreaded Fenris Keep, gathering the necessary ichor so that this mystery might at last be solved. It should be said, for the record, that Fenris Keep was one of the strongest fortresses in Lordaeron during its prime. It was actually here that most of Lordaeron's army was housed, ready to be deployed to any corner of the kingdom if need be. Now, however, the fortress is just this haunted ruin of what it once was, occupied only by Wrought-Hide gnolls and the sickening stench of death and decay. Regardless, ever since I first came here as a kid, Fenris Isle has been one of my favorite places in World of Warcraft, and it remains so to this day. With its tight and almost claustrophobic design, the keep it really feels like a real fortress, and the fact that it's on an island makes the location feel oddly secure, safe, at least from a strategic point of view. I can see why the Kingdom of Lordaeron held this fortress with such high regard during its day, but let's get back to the quest. We collect the ichor, and upon returning to the sepulchre, the apothecary there is able to do a couple of experiments to determine that the substance was made using both warlock and necromantic magic. However, the apothecary, he can't 100% determine who might have made this strange substance, which is why you're sent to the Undercity to present the findings to Bethor Iceshard, one of the leading mages in the Magic Quarter. Perhaps, we are told, his understanding of magic may shed some light as to who is behind the creation of this ichor of undeath and who ultimately is giving all of these gnolls false life. After taking a bat to the Undercity, Bethor immediately knows who is behind this strange magic with only a glance at the evidence that we have brought him. It is a man who Bethor once knew well in his life, whom he actually called one of his closest friends. And his name? Thule Ravenclaw. Apparently, according to Bethor, when the Scourge attacked Lordaeron, Thule joined up with Kel'Thuzad and the Lich King, all for the promise of power. And since then, Bethor assumed that his friend had been killed, that he's been dead for a while, but clearly not. Thule has been the one creating this mysterious ichor, bringing gnolls to life as undead and tasking them to gather the dead of Tirisfal and bring them to the Fenris Isle, all so that he can use his necromantic magic to raise them as undead. And you're gonna have to stop him. This revelation, at least to me, is so wonderfully done in terms of its storytelling, because it really is a slow build-up to such an epic quest chain and conclusion that even to this day, I consider it to be one of my favorite pieces of MMO writing and game design. In the early levels, you're encountering enemies with a mysterious spell called Curse of Thule. You start to encounter other enemies with similar spells and curses like Blessing of Ravenclaw, and it all leads to the reveal that there's this traitor necromancer located in a fortress on a haunted island, raising undead and working against the Forsaken, even teaching some of his dark magic to his creations. This is just such an epic fantasy adventure story, and it's contained within just the first 2 zones of World of Warcraft for a new Forsaken player. And we're just getting started, because the story does not end there. Bethor, because he knew Thule in life, he's fully aware of how powerful of a warlock and necromancer this man must be. So he gives to you this special potion, one that can counter one of Thule's most powerful curses should you drink it. And you're certainly gonna need it, because Thule Ravenclaw isn't just some random NPC on Fenris Island, but an elite warlock / necromancer with his own imp pet, surrounded by undead gnoll bodyguards. And if you don't have a group helping you out, you will be dead and a part of Thule's undead army before you know it. You know, admittingly, a lot of people don't actually do a lot of Silverpine Forest when they're leveling up a Forsaken character. They just run straight to the Barrens. So Thule Ravenclaw and this whole story of what's going on Fenris Isle, many people have completely missed it. They've never had this epic boss fight with Thule Ravenclaw inside of the Fenris Keep. But assuming that all goes well, Thule Ravenclaw dies, and that is the end of the quest chain. The evil conjurer, he's been defeated on his fortress island, and the Forsaken can breathe a sigh of relief that the Rothhide threat is dealt with once and for all. But you know, there's still more to say, because the storytelling doesn't exactly end there for Thule. Now, maybe for many of you it did. You know, oh, you kill the NPC, it's over, whatever. But there's actually more to be learned about Thule Ravenclaw for those that get just a little bit more lucky. Because you see, as you kill Rothhide gnolls on Fenris Isle, there is a small chance that one of them might drop a strange item for you to collect. A talking head. The head belongs to a man named Alaric, who tells you that he was Thule's bodyguard and head servant in his life. Alaric, he had been told by Thule that he was going to be blessed in order to be spared the plague of undeath, but in reality, Thule had other plans. Alaric was blessed with unlife, so that the plague would not kill him, but then Thule proceeded to behead his bodyguard and servant, and give the severed talking head to his wrought-hide gnolls to be a plaything. And you just so happen to be the one to free Alaric from this terrible fate. Now, this is a rather short chain, but you help Alaric find his body just before he tells you about a hidden niche of treasures located inside of the fortress that contains an item that Thule very much valued in his life. You go into the fortress, and once inside, you discover a curious wand that you are told to take to Bethor Iceshard back in the Undercity, as Alaric says that he was one of Thule's closest friends. Also, according to Alaric, he shares a story of Thule and Bethor and a third friend creating this wand as a symbol of their friendship. And even after Thule's betrayal, Thule kept this item as he just couldn't part with it, but he also couldn't let the others have it. Thule simply stole it and hid it away in Fenris Keep, never to be seen again. Alaric, he tells you to leave him in the keep, where he, story-wise, still rests to this day, unable to move or die, and you return to the Undercity once more to deliver this wand to Bethor, who is shocked to discover that this token of their friendship still exists. You're given a reward, and that's it. This quest chain, this secondary one, although it's very short, it actually reveals a lot about Thule Ravenclaw if you read between the lines, especially when you combine this new knowledge with the visual storytelling of Fenris Keep and everything that you've seen so far. Think about it like this. Thule, he apparently was good friends with Bethor Iceshard and this other powerful wizard in life, even making a magical wand as a symbol of their undying friendship to one another. And yet, Thule betrays his two friends. He flees south into Silverpine Forest, and there he now haunts the Lord of Fenris Isle, with such tremendous power at his disposal in the form of the wrought-hide gnolls and all the undead that guard him. His magic and his influence can be felt all across Tirisfal Glades as well as Silverpine Forest, and yet Thule Ravenclaw is entirely alone. Have you ever noticed this? Like, he's alone on the island, surrounded by nothing but mindless gnolls and mindless undead. Even his most trusted bodyguard and servant, he killed him too, all in the name of attaining more power in the ranks of the Scourge. And so now when you see him, you see this man who is still alive. He still has his flesh. He's not an undead, but he's surrounded by nothing, just the silence of the grave and the rotting of the undead that surround him. And curiously, contrast this with Bethor Iceshard in the Undercity, his friend. Now, sure, Bethor is actually undead. He's not still alive like Thule is, but at least Bethor is surrounded by allies and friends. His people are rebuilding their civilization little by little. The Forsaken, they might be forsaken by most, but they haven't forsaken each other. And where this former friend, Thule Ravenclaw, now stands alone, surrounded by the nothingness of his power atop his keep on Fenris Isle, his former friend Bethor Iceshard, he rests in the Undercity, surrounded by allies and true purpose. We never see Thule speak at any point in the quest chain, but we learn so much about him just from his actions and his influence and the visual storytelling of his lonely fortress in the middle of a lake. And that's why he's actually one of my favorite NPCs and lesser known villains in classic World of Warcraft, because his tale is very tragic. And that tragedy isn't exactly shoved into your face in terms of storytelling. You kind of got to read between the lines to figure it out. But now only one question remains that was brought up in the course of this quest chain. Who was this mysterious third friend of Thule and Bethor that made this wand with them? Who was the third wizard that was so powerful? Well, if you want an answer to that question, you will need to watch my previous video already mentioned at the beginning of this storyline, because that particular NPC has a story attached to him that if Blizzard had continued it, it would have changed the face of World of Warcraft forever. Not just from a lore perspective, but even a gameplay perspective as well. That video is on your screen right now if you want to check it out. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, leave a comment, and subscribe if you want. And a big shout out to our channel members who keep all this content alive. I'll see you all with my next video.